Today's topic is one that almost everyone has heard of, but most people get wrong. I'm talking about SCCM and Intune. You've probably heard both names thrown around, and it's easy to assume they're basically the same tool with different names. Two Microsoft products that both manage devices, right? Well, not exactly. Actually, they're two very different tools with different strengths, different philosophies, and different infrastructure requirements. And picking the wrong one means you could waste time and money on infrastructure you don't need or miss the control you actually want. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what each tool actually does, how they compare side by side, and which one makes sense for your organization. So grab your coffee and let's dive in. The core problem, managing devices at scale. Let's start with the problem both tools are trying to solve. If you only have 5 computers in your office, you don't need either one. You can walk over, install software, run updates, and fix things yourself, and that works fine. But what happens with 500 computers, or 5,000, or 50,000? The manual approach stops working very quickly. You can't have IT staff walking to every desk to install a security patch, and you can't check each machine one by one for the right antivirus. It just doesn't scale. 20 years ago, this was a huge problem for large organizations. IT teams had to physically visit machines, install software from CDs, and run updates one at a time. That was slow, expensive, and error-prone. Microsoft looked at this problem and built 2 solutions. One for the old world, where everything lived in your own building on your own servers, and one for the new world, where devices are everywhere, users work remotely, and the cloud handles the heavy lifting. The first is SCCM and the second is Intune. They solve the same core problem, but in completely different ways. So before we compare them head to head, we need to understand what each one actually is. What is SCCM, the on-premises powerhouse? SCCM stands for System Center Configuration Manager, though you might also hear it called Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, or MECM for short. That's the newer name, but most people still call it SCCM. Here's the simplest definition. SCCM is an on-premises tool that you run on your own servers, inside your own building, on your own network. It's software you install and maintain yourself, and it's been the go-to for large enterprises for over 2 decades. SCCM works using what's called an agent-based model. A small piece of software gets installed on every device you want to manage, and that agent reports back to the SCCM server, receives commands, and carries out tasks. It's like having a tiny IT assistant living on each computer, waiting for instructions. So what can SCCM actually do? A lot. First, operating system deployment. You can push out Windows to hundreds of new machines at once, saving days of manual effort. Then software distribution. Install applications like Office or Chrome across your entire organization from one central console. It also handles patch management, so you can roll out security updates on a schedule during maintenance windows with full control over timing and targeting. Compliance reporting shows which machines meet your security standards and which don't. And inventory gives you a complete picture of hardware and software across your environment. Large enterprises have relied on this tool for more than 20 years. It's mature, powerful, and gives IT teams deep granular control over Windows devices. Need to deploy a complex application with dependencies and custom scripts? SCCM can handle it. Need to image 100 new laptops with a custom operating system build? That too. But here's the thing. SCCM requires serious infrastructure. You need domain controllers, SQL servers, site servers, distribution points, management points, and people who know how to set it all up and keep it running. It's not something you just turn on and forget about. And that's where its sibling comes in, a tool from Microsoft that takes a completely different approach, one that doesn't need any of that infrastructure at all. What is Intune? The cloud-native modern tool. Now let's talk about the other option, Intune. Here's the simplest definition. It's a cloud-based service. No servers to buy, no infrastructure to maintain, no SQL databases to manage. Everything runs inside Microsoft's Azure data centers. You sign in through a web browser, configure your policies, and you're done. Instead of the agent-based model, Intune uses a profile-based model. Devices enroll directly with the service over the internet, receive policies and configurations, and check in periodically to report their status. No agent software to install, no management points to configure. The device talks directly to the cloud. That's a big difference in scope. SCCM is primarily a Windows tool. It can manage some other platforms, but its heart and soul is Windows. Intune, on the other hand, supports Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android. So if you have a mixed environment with iPhones for executives, Android tablets for field workers, and MacBooks for the design team, Intune can manage all of them from the same console. So what can Intune actually do? It handles device enrollment. Users can join their own devices, or IT can pre-configure them. It handles application deployment to Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. Conditional access policies require devices to be compliant before they can access company data. Compliance policies define what a healthy device looks like and generate reports. And Windows Update rings let patches roll out in a controlled way without needing WSUS or on-premises infrastructure. This is the direction Microsoft is investing in for the future. Almost every new feature in endpoint management is being built for Intune first. The cloud-native approach is where development resources are going. So we've got two tools that both manage devices. One runs on your servers with agents, the other runs in the cloud with profiles. They're fundamentally different under the hood, and we're going to dig into what that actually means. On-premises versus cloud, the big difference. Actually, the big difference between SCCM and Intune comes down to just one thing: infrastructure. SCCM needs a lot of it. You need domain controllers for authentication, SQL servers to host the site database, site servers to run the core management role, distribution points to host content that devices download, and management points for client communication. Each of these is a separate server, or multiple servers, all running Windows Server, consuming licenses, requiring patches, needing backups. Intune needs one thing: an internet connection. That's it. No servers, no SQL databases, no distribution points, no management points. The infrastructure is Microsoft's problem, not yours. This difference shows up in every part of how these tools work. Take deployment methods. In SCCM, deploying a new operating system to a computer typically involves PXE boot. The device boots from the network, connects to a distribution point, and runs a task sequence that partitions the drive, installs Windows, applies settings, and installs applications. It's powerful, but it requires the device to be on the corporate network, connected to the right infrastructure. Intune takes a completely different approach with Windows Autopilot. A new laptop arrives from the manufacturer, already registered in your tenant. The user turns it on, connects to Wi-Fi, and signs in with their work credentials. From there, Windows configures itself automatically, applications install from the cloud, and policies apply. The device is ready to use in minutes. No imaging, no PXE boot, and no IT staff needed. Update management follows the same pattern. SCCM integrates with WSUS, Windows Server Update Services, to download and approve patches. You configure maintenance windows, create deployment packages, target collections, and monitor compliance. It gives you deep control, but there are a lot of moving parts. Intune uses Windows Update for business. You create update rings, groups of devices with the same update settings, and decide how fast updates roll out, when deadlines happen, and what features to defer. Devices check directly with Microsoft's update servers. No WSUS, no distribution points, no maintenance windows to configure, and security integration follows the same split. Intune connects natively with Azure Active Directory and conditional access. The device reports its compliance status. If it's not compliant, missing an update, no encryption, outdated antivirus, conditional access can block it from accessing email, Teams, or SharePoint. It happens automatically in real time, without any on-premises infrastructure. SCCM has its own compliance engine. It can evaluate policies, generate reports, and remediate issues, but it doesn't integrate as seamlessly with cloud identity and access controls. You can make it work, but it takes more effort and more pieces. These differences aren't abstract. They matter depending on what you're actually trying to do. If your workforce is in one building, on the corporate network, with standardized Windows desktops, SCCM's depth might be exactly what you need. But if your workforce is spread across the country, working from home on a mix of devices, Intune's cloud-native approach starts to look a lot more practical. What each tool does best: feature comparison. So let's put them side by side on the tasks IT teams do every day. This is where the differences really show up. Start with application deployment. In SCCM, you have full control. You can create complex deployments with dependencies. Install this, then that, then check for a registry key before proceeding. You can schedule deployments for specific times, target specific collections, and configure supersedence so old versions get replaced automatically. If you need to deploy a line of business application with custom scripts and multiple MSI files, SCCM handles it. Intune can deploy applications too: Win32 apps, Microsoft Store apps, line of business apps. But it's simpler. You upload the installer, configure detection rules, and assign it to a group. It works well for most common scenarios, but if you need deep orchestration and sequencing, SCCM still wins. Now, OS deployment. This is where SCCM really shines. Task sequences let you do bare metal deployments. A blank hard drive becomes a fully configured Windows machine with applications, settings, and security policies. You can do in-place upgrades from Windows 10 to Windows 11 and customize every step of the process. Intune takes a different approach with Windows Autopilot. The device arrives, the user signs in, and the cloud does the rest. It's faster, simpler, and works great for modern hardware. But if you need to re-image existing machines, handle complex upgrade scenarios, or deploy custom Windows images, SCCM's task sequences are still the gold standard. Compliance and reporting is another area where the tools diverge. SCCM has SQL Server reporting services, so you can build custom reports on almost anything. Which machines have a specific software, which are missing a critical update, what hardware configurations exist across your fleet. The reporting is deep and customizable, but it takes work to set up. Intune has cloud-based dashboards that are much easier to use. You can see compliance status at a glance, drill into specific devices, and export reports. It's less customizable than SCCM, but for most organizations, it's enough. Mobile device management is Intune's territory. SCCM doesn't manage phones or tablets, period. If you have iPhones, Android devices, or iPads in your organization, Intune is the tool you need. It handles enrollment, app deployment, compliance policies, and remote wipe for mobile devices. SCCM simply can't do that. And server management goes the other way. SCCM handles servers, patching, monitoring, inventory, software deployment. It's built for it. Intune has some server support through Azure Arc, but it's limited. If you're managing Windows Server infrastructure, SCCM is still the right tool. So you can see the pattern. SCCM gives you depth and control for complex Windows and server scenarios. Intune gives you simplicity and cross-platform support for modern endpoints. But what if you need both? Co-management, running both at once. That's where co-management comes in. It's Microsoft's supported model where a single device runs under both SCCM and Intune at the same time. Not either or, but both. Let's break down how this works. You enable co-management on your SCCM managed devices, they enroll in Intune, and now both tools manage them simultaneously. But you decide which tool handles which task. Microsoft calls these workload sliders. Think of them like a control panel with switches. For each category of management, compliance policies, device configuration, Windows updates, endpoint protection, application deployment, you slide the switch to either SCCM or Intune. That tool becomes the authority for that workload, and the other tool steps back. For example, you could keep application deployment in SCCM because your complex deployments still need the depth, but slide compliance policies to Intune for cloud-native conditional access integration. You could keep Windows updates in SCCM with your existing maintenance windows, but slide endpoint protection to Intune so Defender policies live in the cloud. You decide workload by workload at your own pace. There's also a feature called Tenant Attach, which surfaces your SCCM managed devices inside the Intune console. So even if you're not ready to move workloads, you can see all your devices in one place, run reports, take actions, and get that unified view without changing how anything works. This makes co-management a gradual migration path. Most organizations use it for 12 to 18 months, starting with the easy workloads like compliance and endpoint protection, then moving updates, then applications step by step, workload by workload, until Intune handles most of the load and SCCM only does what it does best. And here's the thing that surprises a lot of people: licensing. If you have Microsoft 365 E3 or E5, you usually already have rights to both SCCM and Intune, so running both doesn't cost extra. The licensing is already covered. There's no financial reason not to use co-management if it makes sense for your environment. Co-management is the bridge, letting you keep what works while moving toward what's next. But where you start depends entirely on your organization. Decision framework: which one should you use? So you've seen how both tools work, how they compare, and how co-management bridges the gap. The question now is simple: which one should you actually use? Let's break it down by scenario. Use SCCM if you have a large on-premises environment. If your organization has hundreds or thousands of Windows desktops in offices connected to a corporate network, with IT staff managing everything locally. If you need task sequences for OS deployment, imaging new machines, upgrading operating systems, handling complex build processes, or if you manage servers, patching, monitoring, inventory, if you require deep custom reporting that pulls data from SQL databases and generates detailed compliance audits, SCCM is built for these scenarios. It's mature, proven, and gives you the control you need. On the other hand, use Intune if you're cloud first. If your organization has already moved most of its infrastructure to the cloud, or you're planning to. If you have a remote workforce working from home, coffee shops, anywhere. If you need to manage mobile devices like iPhones, Android phones, iPads. If you're a smaller organization without dedicated IT infrastructure or the budget for on-premises servers. Intune gives you everything you need without the overhead. And for large enterprises migrating to the cloud, co-management is the bridge. If you have existing SCCM infrastructure and expertise but know the future is cloud-based, use co-management. If you need the depth of SCCM for some workloads like complex app deployments or server management, but want cloud flexibility for compliance policies or mobile device management, co-management lets you have both, shifting workloads at your own pace. Here's a reality check. Intune can handle roughly 80 to 85% of typical device management scenarios. That's a lot, and for most organizations, Intune alone is enough. But that 15 to 20% gap matters if you need it. If you're in that gap, needing task sequences, complex app dependencies, deep server management, then SCCM or co-management is the right call. A real example helps bring this to life. Real-world example: a company's migration. Picture a mid-sized company with 2,000 Windows desktops and 500 mobile devices. They started with SCCM for everything, and for years it worked well. The IT team knew that tool inside and out, deployments were controlled, patching was predictable, and life was good. But then remote work happened. Suddenly, half the workforce was at home, and those on-premises patching cycles stopped working. Devices that never left the office were now scattered across the city. VPN connections were slow, and maintenance windows didn't apply when machines were turned off at night. The old model was breaking. They didn't rip out SCCM overnight. Instead, they spent 14 months implementing co-management. First, they moved mobile device management to Intune. All 500 iPhones and Android devices now managed from the cloud. Next came compliance policies. Devices had to meet security standards before accessing company data, enforced through conditional access. Then they moved Windows updates. Update rings replaced maintenance windows, and devices checked directly with Microsoft servers instead of the on-premises WSUS infrastructure. But they kept task sequences in SCCM for situations like deploying a custom operating system image to a lab full of machines. They also kept complex app deployments there. The line of business applications with custom scripts and multiple dependencies. Those stayed where the depth was. By the time they finished, server infrastructure costs were down by 60%. They decommissioned distribution points, management points, and SQL servers. The remote worker experience improved dramatically. Devices got updates and policies without needing a VPN, and they still had deep control for the legacy applications that required it. That's the pattern more organizations are following. Not a sudden switch, but a gradual workload by workload migration. Co-management is the bridge, and the destination is a modern cloud-connected endpoint management strategy. So here's what you need to remember. SCCM and Intune solve the same problem in very different ways. On-premises depth versus cloud simplicity. Agent-based control versus profile-based flexibility. One is a 20-year veteran, the other is the future Microsoft is building. Intune is the direction things are heading, but SCCM isn't dead. It's still the right tool for complex Windows environments, server management, and organizations that need deep control. And co-management gives you both, a gradual path from one to the other at your own pace. Here's your homework. Look at your current environment and identify one workload you could move to Intune this month. Start with something simple. Compliance policies may be your mobile device management. Try it. See how it feels. You don't have to move everything at once. If this episode helped you understand the difference between SCCM and Intune, please subscribe to the channel. We break down Microsoft's endpoint management options in plain English, one knowledge nugget at a time. Thanks for listening.